Welcome to Monk's Temple. Find a comfortable position. You do not need to sit cross-legged or light candles. You can be exactly where you are right now, reading these words in bed, on a couch, or on a train. Wherever you are is exactly the right place to begin. Take a breath. Just one conscious breath. Notice how the air feels moving in, and then how it feels leaving. That is all. You have just arrived in the present moment. We spend most of our lives somewhere else. Our bodies sit in chairs, but our minds are trapped in yesterday's argument or projected into tomorrow's disasters. The body is always in the present. The mind is almost always somewhere else. This is the source of so much suffering. There is a story about Catherine who came to a therapist because she could not sleep. For 7 years, she averaged less than 4 hours per night. She tried everything. Nothing worked. The therapist asked, "What happens when you lie down?" Catherine said, "My brain turns on. It reviews the day. It plans tomorrow. It worries about everything I forgot. It's like a committee meeting where no one knows how to adjourn." The therapist said, "Your problem is not that you cannot sleep. Your problem is that you cannot stop thinking. Sleep happens naturally when thinking stops. You have been watering the petals. You need to water the root." This story points to something both the Buddha and Jesus understood. The root of suffering is not in circumstances but in our relationship to our own minds. The Buddha expressed this through the metaphor of 2 arrows. The first arrow is the actual painful event. You lose your job. Someone you love falls ill. The first arrow is unavoidable. But then we shoot ourselves with a second arrow. This second arrow is our reaction. We tell stories about how unfair it is. We blame ourselves. We replay the event, adding layers of suffering on top of the original pain. The first arrow hits the body. The second arrow hits the mind. The second arrow is entirely optional. Jesus expressed a similar truth when he said, "Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself." This is profound psychological insight. Jesus understood that worry is suffering we create by living in a future that does not exist. When we worry, we experience the bad thing twice, once in anticipation and again in reality. Often, the anticipation is far worse. Consider Marcus. Marcus feared public speaking. He was asked to give a toast at his best friend's wedding. For 3 months beforehand, he barely slept. He imagined every disaster. He rehearsed hundreds of times with racing heart. The wedding day arrived. Marcus stood and delivered the toast perfectly. People applauded. And Marcus realized something astonishing: the 3 months of suffering were completely unnecessary. The actual event lasted 3 minutes and was fine. The suffering was entirely manufactured by his own mind. This is our first insight: most suffering is self-created. Real pain exists. Loss is real. Grief is real. But beneath these unavoidable first arrows, we add layer upon layer of second arrows. We add judgment: I should not feel this way. We add resistance: this should not be happening. We add narrative: this always happens to me. Each layer is another wound. The Buddha's entire teaching can be seen as a method for learning to stop shooting the second arrow. He taught that the mind can be trained like the body. You would not run a marathon without training. Yet we expect ourselves to navigate our minds without any training at all. We are handed a mind at birth and spend our lives using it without ever learning how it works. Buddhism offers a technology for understanding the mind. It is not a belief system. It is a practical investigation into consciousness. The Buddha told followers not to accept his teachings on faith but to test them like a goldsmith tests gold by cutting, heating, and rubbing. This scientific approach is why Buddhist insights resonate with modern psychology. Modern research confirms what the Buddha described 25 centuries ago: the brain has a negativity bias. It pays more attention to threats than opportunities, remembers failures more vividly than successes. This served our ancestors well. The caveman who worried about the rustling bush survived. But in the modern world, this bias becomes chronic suffering. We live in bodies designed for the savannah, navigating information overload. A critical email triggers the same response as a physical attack. Cortisol floods. Heart rate increases. Muscles tense. You are ready to fight. But there is nothing to fight. The stress accumulates, creating tension, anxiety, and eventually illness. This is where mindfulness becomes essential. Mindfulness is the gentle practice of noticing what is happening now without trying to change it. Imagine sitting on a riverbank, watching leaves float by. Some leaves carry pleasant thoughts. Some carry painful memories. Some carry future worries. The practice is to sit and watch without jumping in to grab or push away. Just watching. Just noticing. Just being present. There is a story about a meditation teacher named Lila leading a retreat. A frustrated student said, "I have sat for 3 days and my mind will not stop. It is worse than before." Lila smiled. "That is wonderful. You have lived in a noisy room your whole life but did not know it was noisy because you never experienced silence. Now you can finally hear the noise. This is the first step forward. When we first observe the mind, it often seems worse. We become painfully aware of constant chattering, endless commentary, relentless judging. But this awareness is not the problem. It is the solution. You cannot fix a machine you do not know is broken. You cannot calm a mind you do not know is agitated. The first step is always awareness. Jesus also taught presence. He spoke of the kingdom of God within you, available now. The Lord's Prayer asks for daily bread, not monthly. It asks for forgiveness while offering forgiveness. It asks for deliverance from temptation, recognizing the mind's vulnerability. This is a template for mental health disguised as prayer. If this exploration resonates, please subscribe to Monk's Temple. By subscribing, you make a commitment to your own inner peace. Take a moment now and hit subscribe. Let us return to Catherine, the woman who could not sleep. After her conversation with the therapist, she began a simple practice. Each night, when she lay down and the committee meeting began, she did not try to silence the voices. She simply noticed them. She imagined herself sitting in a theater, watching the thoughts perform on stage. She did not boo them. She did not applaud them. She just watched. The first night, the thoughts raged on for hours. But something was different. There was now a small space between Catherine and her thoughts. She was no longer the thoughts. She was the one watching the thoughts. That space, however small, was freedom. This is the heart of Buddhist practice, creating space between awareness and its contents. The Buddha taught that we are not our thoughts. We are the awareness in which thoughts arise and pass away. Thoughts come and go like clouds in a vast sky. The sky is not disturbed by the clouds. The sky does not try to hold on to the beautiful clouds or push away the storm clouds. The sky remains open, empty, and at peace. We are the sky, not the clouds. But we have forgotten this. We have become convinced that we are the clouds. When a dark thought arises, we believe we are dark. When an anxious thought arises, we believe we are anxious. When an angry thought arises, we believe we are angry. We have no distance. We are completely identified with whatever passes through the mind. This is what the Buddha called ignorance. Not lack of information, but lack of self-knowledge. We have forgotten our true nature. There is a story about a woman named Patricia who came to a meditation center completely exhausted. She was a successful lawyer, but she described herself as a hamster on a wheel running faster and faster and getting nowhere. She had achieved everything society told her would make her happy: the prestigious job, the nice apartment, the relationships, the vacations. But inside, she felt empty. She said to the teacher, "I have everything, so why do I feel like I have nothing?" The teacher handed her a glass of water. "Look at this glass," the teacher said. "It is full of water. Now I am going to add salt." The teacher stirred salt into the water. "Can you see the salt?" Patricia shook her head. "Now," the teacher said, "I am going to add this same amount of salt to this lake." He pointed out the window to a large lake. "Would you be able to taste the salt in the lake?" Patricia said, "No, the lake is too vast. The salt would dissolve and become undetectable." The teacher smiled. "Your mind right now is the glass. Every little irritation, every small worry, every passing thought tastes overwhelmingly salty because your mind is small and contracted. The goal of practice is to become the lake. The same problems will arise. The same salt will be poured. But it will dissolve in the vastness of your awareness. The salt does not change. The capacity of the container changes. This is the work. This is why we sit in meditation. Not to make the salt disappear, but to become vast enough that the salt no longer poisons the water." Jesus also spoke of this vastness, though in different language. He said, "The kingdom of God is within you." He was pointing to the same truth, that there is something within each person that is already whole, already complete, already at peace. The problem is not that we lack this kingdom. The problem is that we do not know how to access it. We are like someone standing in a magnificent palace, staring at the floor, convinced we live in a dungeon. Jesus taught that this kingdom is accessed through what he called prayer in secret. He said, "When you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen." This is not about literal rooms. It is about turning attention inward. It is about closing the door on the constant stimulation of the senses and the endless chatter of the mind. It is about entering the inner chamber of the heart, where the divine presence dwells in silence. Consider a man named Richard. Richard was a busy executive who never stopped moving. His days were filled with meetings, calls, emails, decisions. He was constantly stimulated, constantly engaged, constantly on. He prided himself on his productivity. But late at night, when the stimulation stopped, he felt a profound emptiness. He could not sit still for 5 minutes without reaching for his phone. Silence terrified him. A friend invited him to a silent retreat. Richard thought it sounded like torture, but he was desperate enough to try. The first day was agony. His mind screamed for stimulation. He felt like he was going crazy. But on the third day, something shifted. The screaming subsided. In the silence, he began to hear something else. It was not a voice. It was more like a presence. A deep, quiet sense of okayness that had nothing to do with his achievements or failures. For the first time in his adult life, Richard felt at home in his own skin. This is what both traditions point toward. The Buddha called it awakening. Jesus called it the kingdom. But they were describing the same experiential reality, the discovery that beneath the waves of thought and emotion, there is a deep, still ocean of peace. And that ocean is who you really are. Let us sit with Richard for a moment longer. After his silent retreat, he returned to his busy life, but something had changed. The meetings were still there. The emails still piled up. The decisions still needed to be made. But there was now a background hum of peace that had not been there before. The chaos continued on the surface, but the depths remained still. This is the promise of the spiritual path. Not that the waves will stop crashing, but that you will discover you are not the waves. You are the ocean. But how do we make this discovery permanent? How do we live from this place of depth rather than being tossed around by every passing wave? Both the Buddha and Jesus offered practical guidance for this. They did not just point to the destination. They provided maps. The Buddha's map is the Noble Eightfold Path. Let us simplify it into 3 categories: wisdom, ethics, and meditation. Wisdom is seeing clearly. Ethics is acting kindly. Meditation is training the mind. These 3 support each other like the legs of a stool. Remove one, and the whole thing collapses. Wisdom begins with understanding impermanence. Everything changes. The body changes. Emotions change. Relationships change. Circumstances change. This is not a pessimistic observation. It is simply reality. When we forget impermanence, we suffer. We cling to things that are slipping away. We fight against changes we cannot stop. We build our houses on sand and then wonder why they keep falling down. There is a story about a man named Harold who loved his garden. He spent years cultivating it. Every flower was planted with care. Every weed was pulled by hand. His garden was his masterpiece. Then a storm came. Not a terrible storm, just a storm. But it was enough to destroy half his flowers. Harold was devastated. He could not eat. He could not sleep. He walked through the ruined garden weeping. His neighbor, an older woman named Grace, came to check on him. She looked at the damaged garden and then at Harold's tear-streaked face. "Harold," she said gently, "did you think you had made a deal with the weather?" Harold looked confused. "What do you mean?" Grace said, "You acted as if your garden was permanent. You acted as if the storm would never come. But the storm always comes. That is the nature of weather. The only question is whether you will build a garden that can survive the storm, or whether you will collapse every time the rain falls. This is wisdom. Not avoiding storms, but building a garden that can weather them. Not clinging to flowers, but planting seeds that will grow again. Jesus also taught about impermanence, though he used different images. He told a story about a man who built his house on rock and another who built his house on sand. When the rains came and the floods rose, the house on rock stood firm. The house on sand collapsed. The rock, for Jesus, was not literal stone. It was the practice of living from the kingdom within. It was building a life on the foundation of divine love rather than on the shifting sands of worldly success, approval, and acquisition. Consider Sophia. Sophia was a woman who derived her entire sense of worth from her appearance. She spent hours each day on makeup, hair, clothing. She could not leave the house without checking every mirror. She was beautiful by any standard, but she lived in constant fear. Fear of aging. Fear of gaining weight. Fear of being seen without makeup. Fear of being judged. Her house was built on sand, and every passing year eroded the foundation a little more. One day, Sophia volunteered at a nursing home. She met a woman named Eleanor who was 93 years old. Eleanor's skin was wrinkled. Her hair was thin and white. Her body was frail. But Eleanor's eyes sparkled with a joy that Sophia had never seen in anyone. Sophia asked Eleanor what her secret was. Eleanor laughed. "Honey, I stopped trying to be beautiful 40 years ago. I discovered I already was beautiful. I just couldn't see it because I was too busy looking in the mirror." This is the shift. From building on sand to building on rock. From identifying with the impermanent to resting in the eternal. From the surface waves to the deep ocean. The second leg of the stool is ethics. In Buddhism, ethical conduct is not about obeying a divine lawgiver. It is about understanding that our actions shape our minds. When we lie, we create a mind that is anxious about being discovered. When we steal, we create a mind that fears punishment. When we speak harshly, we create a mind that anticipates conflict. Ethical living simplifies the mind. It removes the sources of guilt, fear, and remorse that clutter our inner landscape. It creates the conditions for peace. Jesus taught the same principle when he said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." A pure heart is not a perfect heart. It is a heart without hidden agendas, without deceit, without malice. It is a heart that has been cleaned of the clutter that blocks our vision. When the heart is pure, we can see clearly. And what we see is the divine presence that has been there all along. The third leg is meditation. This is the direct training of attention. It is the practice of returning again and again to the present moment. Not because the present moment is always pleasant, but because it is the only place where life actually happens. The past is memory. The future is imagination. Only the present is real. Meditation is the practice of showing up for reality. There is a story about a monk who was asked, "What do you do all day in the monastery?" The monk said, "We sit. We walk. We eat. We sleep." The questioner was puzzled. "But everyone does those things. What makes what you do different?" The monk smiled. "When we sit, we know we are sitting. When we walk, we know we are walking. When we eat, we know we are eating. When we sleep, we know we are sleeping. You do these things, but you are somewhere else. We are here." This is the entire path in one sentence, learning to be here. Not somewhere else. Here. Now. Present. Alive. Let us sit with the monk's words for a moment. We are here. Such a simple statement. Yet for most of us, being here is the most difficult thing in the world. We are constantly pulled elsewhere. Pulled into regrets about the past. Pulled into worries about the future. Pulled into fantasies about how things could be different. We are like a person standing in a beautiful meadow but staring at a photograph of a different meadow, completely missing the flowers blooming at our feet. Why is this? Why is it so hard to simply be present? The Buddha had a clear answer: craving and aversion. We crave pleasant experiences, so we chase after them in the future or cling to memories of them from the past. We have aversion to unpleasant experiences, so we try to avoid them in the future or suppress memories of them from the past. This constant pushing and pulling keeps us trapped in time. It keeps us from ever fully inhabiting the present moment. Jesus diagnosed the same problem when he spoke about mammon. Mammon was not just money. It was the entire system of worldly values that keeps us chasing after more. More security. More comfort. More approval. More status. Jesus saw that this chasing is a form of idolatry. It puts something finite at the center of our lives, and anything finite will eventually disappoint. He said, "You cannot serve both God and mammon. You cannot serve the eternal and the temporary. You have to choose." There is a story about a woman named Linda who learned this lesson the hard way. Linda was a collector. She collected antiques, art, books, jewelry. Her house was beautiful, filled with valuable objects. But Linda could not enjoy any of it because she was constantly worried about damage, theft, depreciation. She spent more time insuring her possessions than enjoying them. Her possessions possessed her. One day, there was a small fire in her kitchen. No one was hurt. The damage was minimal. But for a few terrifying hours, Linda faced the possibility of losing everything. In those hours, she had a revelation. She realized that her attachment to her things was causing her more suffering than the loss of the things themselves ever could. The fear of losing them was a heavier burden than the actual loss would be. After the fire, Linda began to give things away. Not all at once, but steadily. She gave a painting to her daughter. She gave a book to a friend. She gave furniture to a family in need. With each gift, she felt lighter. She was not losing anything. She was freeing herself from the weight of possession. She was learning to serve God instead of mammon. This is what the Buddha meant by non-attachment. Non-attachment does not mean having nothing. It means nothing having you. It means being able to hold things lightly, knowing they will pass. It means enjoying the flowers without demanding that they bloom forever. The practice of non-attachment begins with small things. The next time you are eating something delicious, notice the impulse to make it last forever. Notice how the mind tries to hold on to the flavor, to prolong the pleasure. See if you can simply enjoy it fully while it lasts and let it go when it ends. The next time you are caught in traffic, notice the impulse to fight reality. Notice how the mind wants the traffic to be gone, wants to be somewhere else. See if you can simply be in the traffic, accepting what is, without adding the second arrow of resistance. This is training. This is how we build the mental muscle of presence. One small moment at a time. Jesus also taught this practice of letting go. He said, "If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, give your coat as well." This sounds absurd. It sounds like weakness. But Jesus was not giving legal advice. He was teaching the psychology of non-resistance. He was saying that when you stop fighting for what you think you deserve, you discover a freedom that cannot be taken away. The person who takes your shirt can also take your coat, but they cannot take your peace unless you give it to them. Consider a man named Derek. Derek was involved in a bitter dispute with his brother over their parents' inheritance. The amount of money was not large, but the principle mattered to Derek. His brother had wronged him, and Derek wanted justice. He hired a lawyer. He prepared for court. He spent sleepless nights rehearsing arguments. The dispute dragged on for 2 years, consuming his thoughts, poisoning his relationship with his brother, costing more in legal fees than the inheritance was worth. One day, Derek's daughter asked him a simple question. "Dad, if you could go back in time and never have this fight, would you?" Derek opened his mouth to say yes, of course. But then he stopped. He realized that going back in time was impossible. But he could end the fight now. He could walk away. He could give his brother not just the shirt but the coat too. The next day, he called his brother and said, "Keep it all. I'm done." The relief was immediate and overwhelming. Derek had not lost anything. He had gained his life back. He had stopped serving mammon and started serving peace. This is the paradox at the heart of both traditions. Letting go is not losing. It is winning. Surrender is not weakness. It is strength. Death to the small self is birth to the true self. The path is counterintuitive. It goes against every survival instinct we have. But it is the only path that leads to lasting peace. Let us sit with Derek's relief for a moment. That feeling of lightness after letting go of a long-held grievance. That is not just psychological relief. That is a spiritual experience. That is a taste of freedom. But why is letting go so hard? If surrender brings such relief, why do we cling so desperately to our hurts, our possessions, our opinions? The answer lies in the nature of the ego. The ego is the part of us that believes it is a separate, solid, permanent self. The ego needs things to hold on to. It needs its stories. It needs its grievances. They prove it exists. Without them, the ego fears it would dissolve into nothing. The Buddha analyzed this phenomenon with precision. He taught that the sense of a solid me is an illusion. It is constructed from 5 aggregates: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. These 5 aggregates are constantly changing. They are like a river, never the same from one moment to the next. But we cling to them. We call them me and mine. And this clinging is the root of suffering. Jesus pointed to the same truth when he said, "Whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for my sake will find it." This is not a paradox for the sake of being clever. It is a description of how the human mind works. The more we try to protect and preserve the ego, the more we suffer. The more we are willing to let it go, the more we discover who we really are. There is a story about a man named Victor who learned this through failure. Victor was a high achiever. Valedictorian in high school. Honors college graduate. Top of his law school class. Partner at a prestigious firm by age 35. His entire identity was built on success. Then he lost a major case. It was not his fault. The evidence simply did not support his client. But Victor crumbled. He could not eat. He could not sleep. He could not face his colleagues. He took a leave of absence and hid in his apartment. His wife finally convinced him to see a therapist. In the first session, Victor explained his situation. The therapist listened and then asked, "Victor, if you had never won a single case in your entire career, who would you be?" Victor stared blankly. He had no answer. He had never considered this question. His entire sense of self was built on winning. Without it, he felt like nobody. This is the crisis the ego cannot survive. When the things we identify with are threatened or taken away, the ego panics. It feels like death. And in a way, it is. It is the death of a false self. And that death, while terrifying, is also the only doorway to the true self. The therapist worked with Victor for months. Slowly, Victor began to see that he was not his wins or his losses. He was not his career or his reputation. He was something deeper. Something that existed before any of those things and would exist after them. By the end of therapy, Victor had not given up his ambition. He still worked hard. He still wanted to win. But winning no longer owned him. He could lose and still be okay. He had lost his life to find it. This is the work of spiritual practice. It is the slow, patient dismantling of the false self. It is the peeling away of all the layers of identity we have accumulated until nothing is left but what is real. This process is not comfortable. The ego does not go quietly. It fights. It screams. It throws tantrums. But if we persist, if we continue to sit in meditation, continue to pray, continue to observe without clinging, the ego eventually calms down. It realizes it is not being destroyed. It is being transcended. In Buddhist practice, this is called seeing through the self. It is not that the self disappears. It is that we stop being fooled by it. We see that it is a construction, a useful convention for navigating the world, but not the ultimate truth of who we are. We stop defending it so fiercely. We stop investing all our energy in protecting it. And in that letting go, we discover a freedom we never knew was possible. In Christian practice, this is called dying to self. It is the recognition that the ego must be crucified so that the true self can be resurrected. This is why the cross is the central symbol of Christianity. It represents the death of the false self. And the resurrection represents the birth of the true self, the self that is one with God. Consider a woman named Angela. Angela was a devoted mother. Her children were her entire life. She lived for them. She sacrificed everything for them. On the surface, this looked like love. But beneath the surface, Angela's identity was completely entangled with her children. She needed them to need her. When they grew up and moved away, she fell into a deep depression. She felt she had nothing left to live for. A wise counselor said to her, "Angela, you have been a wonderful mother. But now your children need you to become something else. They need you to become a whole person, not just a mother. They need you to find yourself, so they can be free to find themselves. This was Angela's invitation to die to the old self and be reborn. It was terrifying. But she took the invitation. She started painting, something she had loved as a girl. She reconnected with old friends. She discovered parts of herself she had buried for decades. She did not stop being a mother. She became something more. She became herself. This is the invitation for all of us. To stop clinging to who we think we are. To stop defending the false self. To be willing to die so that we can truly live. Let us sit with Angela for a moment. Her story reveals something essential about the spiritual journey. It requires courage. Not the courage to face external enemies, but the courage to face ourselves. The courage to look honestly at who we have become and to ask the terrifying question, is this really me? Most of us go through life never asking this question. We inherit identities from our parents, our culture, our peers. We become our jobs, our roles, our relationships. We build elaborate structures of identity and then spend our lives defending them. But these structures are not who we are. They are who we learn to be. And learning to be someone else is the work of a lifetime. The Buddha called this process of identity construction, becoming. It is the constant activity of the mind, building a sense of self out of the materials at hand. Today's self is built from yesterday's experiences, tomorrow's hopes, and today's fears. But this self is not solid. It is a process. And because it is a process, it can be changed. Jesus spoke of this when he said, "You must be born again." This phrase has been misunderstood and overused, but at its core, it points to the same truth, the possibility of radical transformation. Not small improvements. Not minor adjustments. A complete rebirth. A new way of being in the world. There is a story about a man named Frank who experienced this rebirth. Frank was a construction worker, a good man by all accounts. He worked hard, provided for his family, went to church on Sundays. But Frank had a temper. It was his one flaw, as he saw it. When things did not go his way, he exploded. He never hit anyone, but his words could cut deeply. His wife walked on eggshells. His children learned to stay quiet. Frank knew his temper was a problem, but he had accepted it as part of who he was. "That's just me," he would say after an outburst. "I've always been this way." He had built an identity around his temper. It was part of his self-story. "I'm the guy with the short fuse. That's just how I am." One day, his teenage daughter did something that triggered his rage. He felt the familiar heat rise in his chest. The words were forming on his tongue. But before he could speak, he saw something in his daughter's eyes. It was fear. Pure, naked fear of her own father. And in that moment, Frank saw himself through her eyes. He saw not a man with a temper, but a man causing pain to the people he loved most. Something broke in Frank. Not his temper, but his identification with it. For the first time, he saw that his temper was not him. It was something that arose in him, but it was not who he was. In that moment of seeing, a space opened. And in that space, Frank made a choice. He did not speak the angry words. He took a breath. He walked outside. He sat on the porch and wept. That was the beginning of Frank's rebirth. He did not lose his temper overnight. It still arose. But now he saw it as something separate from himself. He could watch it rise, feel its heat, and choose not to act. He was being born again, not into a new religion, but into a new relationship with himself. This is what both traditions offer, the possibility of freedom from the patterns that have bound us. Not by fighting them, but by seeing through them. Not by suppressing them, but by understanding them. Not by becoming someone else, but by discovering who we have always been beneath the layers of conditioning. In Buddhist practice, this is called witness consciousness. It is the part of the mind that can observe the mind. It is like the sky that watches the clouds pass without being affected by them. Developing this witness is the core of meditation. We sit and watch thoughts arise and pass. We watch emotions arise and pass. We watch sensations arise and pass. And slowly, we begin to realize that we are not any of these things. We are the watching itself. In Christian practice, this is called contemplation. It is a form of prayer that goes beyond words, beyond thoughts, beyond images. It is simply resting in the presence of God. It is letting go of all our mental activity and abiding in the divine stillness. In that stillness, we discover that we are not our thoughts. We are not our emotions. We are not our sins or our virtues. We are children of God, resting in the love that created us. Consider a woman named Helen. Helen was a lifelong Christian who had always prayed with words. She recited prayers. She made requests. She gave thanks. But she felt something was missing. Her prayer felt like talking to someone who was not there. She shared this with her spiritual director, who said, "Helen, for 30 years you have been talking to God. Perhaps it is time to listen." Helen did not know how to listen. Her director taught her a simple practice. She was to sit quietly for 20 minutes each day, not saying anything, just being present. When thoughts came, she was to let them go and return to simply being present. She was to rest in God's presence like a child resting in a parent's arms, not needing to say anything, just being together. At first, Helen found this impossible. Her mind raced. She felt she was wasting time. But she persisted. And slowly, something shifted. The racing slowed. The silence deepened. And in that silence, Helen began to experience a presence that had always been there but that she had been too busy talking to notice. She was not hearing voices. She was experiencing communion. She was being reborn into a new kind of relationship with the divine. This is the invitation. To stop talking. To stop striving. To stop defending. And simply to be present. Present to ourselves. Present to each other. Present to the mystery that some call Buddha nature and some call the kingdom of God. It is the same invitation. It always has been. Let us sit with Helen in that silence for a moment. The practice of simply being present, without agenda, without words, without striving. This is the heart of both traditions. This is what the Buddha practiced under the Bodhi tree. This is what Jesus practiced in the Garden of Gethsemane. Not doing. Just being. Just present. Just aware. But here is the challenge. we live in a world that hates silence. The modern world is designed to keep us distracted. Our phones buzz with notifications. Our screens glow with endless content. Our ears are filled with music, podcasts, news, conversation. Silence has become frightening. In silence, we might have to face ourselves. In silence, we might hear things we do not want to hear. In silence, the accumulated noise of a lifetime might finally become audible. There is a story about a man named Greg who could not tolerate silence. Greg drove to work with the radio on. He worked with headphones in. He came home and turned on the television. He fell asleep with a podcast playing. He woke up and immediately reached for his phone. Greg was not escaping anything specific. He was escaping everything general. He was escaping the vague unease that arose whenever he was alone with his own mind. Greg's wife convinced him to attend a weekend retreat. It was not a silent retreat, but there were periods of silence. The first silent period was 30 minutes. Greg lasted about 3 minutes before he felt actual physical discomfort. His skin crawled. His mind screamed for stimulation. He checked his phone, then felt guilty, then checked it again. He could not do it. That night, the teacher gave a talk about what he called the ministry of silence. He said, "Silence is not empty. Silence is full. It is full of everything we have been running from. It is full of our grief, our fear, our longing, our love. We think silence will be boring, but silence is the most interesting place you can go. It is where you finally meet yourself." Greg decided to try again. The next morning, during a silent period, he sat on a bench overlooking a field. He did not check his phone. He did not run. He just sat. For the first 10 minutes, his mind raged. But then, something shifted. The rage subsided. Beneath it, he felt sadness. He sat with that. The sadness deepened, then shifted, and beneath it, he felt something else. Something like peace. Not the absence of feeling, but the presence of something deeper than feeling. For the first time in his adult life, Greg was not escaping. He was home. This is what both traditions offer: the courage to stop running. The courage to sit with whatever arises. The courage to discover that beneath all the noise, there is a silence that is not empty but full. Full of peace. Full of presence. Full of love. The Buddha described this as the unconditioned. It is the one thing that does not arise and pass away. It is always present, always available, always waiting. We do not create it through our practice. We uncover it. It is like the sun behind the clouds. The clouds come and go, but the sun is always there. Our practice is not to create sunshine. It is to let the clouds disperse. Jesus described this as the kingdom of God within. Not something we earn or achieve. Something we discover. Something that has been there since before we were born. Something that will be there after we die. Something that is closer to us than our own breath. Consider a woman named Irene. Irene was a hospice nurse. She spent her days with people who were dying. She witnessed every possible reaction to death. Fear, denial, anger, bargaining, and sometimes, profound peace. She noticed that the patients who died peacefully were not necessarily the ones who had lived the most virtuous lives or followed the most correct religion. They were the ones who had made peace with themselves. They were the ones who had stopped running. One of her patients was a man named Arthur. Arthur had been a successful businessman, but he had also been cruel. He had hurt people. He had made enemies. Now, in his final weeks, he was tormented by regret. He could not sleep. He could not eat. He was haunted by faces from his past. Irene sat with Arthur. She did not try to fix him. She did not offer platitudes. She just sat. One day, Arthur said, "I have done terrible things. How can I die with this?" Irene said, "Arthur, you cannot undo what you did. But you can sit with the pain of it. You can stop running from it. That is your work now. Not to fix the past. Just to be present with the present." Arthur cried. Then he got angry. Then he cried again. Irene kept sitting with him. Over the following weeks, something shifted. Arthur stopped fighting his regret. He stopped trying to escape it. He just let it be there. And in that letting be, the regret transformed. It did not disappear, but it softened. It became something like sorrow, and then something like tenderness. In his final days, Arthur was at peace. Not because he had earned it, but because he had stopped running. This is the invitation of the spiritual life. To stop running. To sit with ourselves exactly as we are. To discover that we are already home. We have always been home. We just forgot. Let us sit with Arthur for a moment. A man who spent his entire life running, only to find peace in his final weeks by finally stopping. This is the tragedy of the human condition. We spend our lives searching for something we already have. We travel to distant places, accumulate possessions, achieve goals, all in pursuit of a peace that has been waiting for us at home all along. The Buddha called this home Nibbana, the unconditioned. It is not a place. It is not a state. It is the fundamental ground of being. It is what is left when everything else is stripped away. The problem is that we have covered it over with so much stuff. We have covered it with desires, aversions, opinions, identities. We have built a house on top of it and then forgotten the ground beneath. Jesus called this home the kingdom of God. He said it is like a treasure hidden in a field. A man finds the treasure, and then joyfully sells everything he has to buy the field. The treasure was always there. The man did not create it. He discovered it. And once discovered, everything else became secondary. There is a story about a woman named Nora who discovered this treasure in the most unlikely place. Nora was a corporate lawyer in a major city. She was successful by every external measure. But internally, she was empty. She had tried therapy, exercise, relationships, travel, shopping. Nothing filled the void. She felt like she was standing on the edge of an abyss, and she was terrified of falling in. One day, on a whim, she signed up for a meditation retreat. She had no interest in Buddhism. She had no interest in spirituality. She just wanted relief from the constant churning of her mind. The retreat was 10 days of silence. No phones. No books. No talking. Just sitting with herself. The first 3 days were torture. Her mind screamed. Her body ached. She wanted to leave every hour. But she stayed. On the 4th day, something shifted. The screaming quieted. The aching softened. And beneath it all, she felt something she had never felt before, a deep, quiet sense of okayness. It was not happiness. It was not excitement. It was something more fundamental. It was the sense that, underneath everything, she was okay. She had always been okay. She had just been too busy to notice. This is the treasure. This is what Nora discovered. Not a new belief system. Not a new identity. Not a new achievement. Just the ground of her own being. The thing that was there before she was born and will be there after she dies. The thing that all the striving and achieving was trying to find but could never reach because it was already here. In Buddhist terms, Nora had a glimpse of her Buddha nature. This is the teaching that every being already has the potential for awakening. It is not something we acquire. It is something we uncover. Like a diamond covered in mud, we do not need to become a diamond. We need to clean off the mud. In Christian terms, Nora had a glimpse of the indwelling Christ. This is the teaching that God is not far away in some distant heaven. God is within us, closer than our own breath. We do not need to ascend to reach God. We need to descend. We need to go inward, past all the noise and clutter, to the holy place where God dwells. Consider a man named Paul. Paul was a minister who had spent 30 years serving God. He preached sermons, led prayers, visited the sick, buried the dead. He did all the right things. But late at night, in the quiet of his study, he felt a terrible emptiness. He felt like he was serving a God he did not actually know. A friend suggested he go on a silent retreat. Paul resisted. He was a minister. He already knew about God. What could silence teach him? But the emptiness was unbearable, so he went. The first day, he tried to pray his usual prayers. They felt hollow. The second day, he tried to meditate on scripture. That also felt hollow. By the third day, he was desperate. He sat in the chapel and did nothing. He just sat. And then, in that doing nothing, something happened. He did not see a vision. He did not hear a voice. But he felt a presence. It was not the God he had been talking about for 30 years. It was something more intimate. Something that felt like home. Paul sat in that presence for hours. When he finally left the chapel, he was weeping. Not from sadness. From relief. He had spent his whole life looking for God out there, and God had been in here all along. This is the great revelation. The kingdom is within. Buddha nature is inherent. The treasure is hidden in the field of your own heart. You do not need to become anything. You do not need to achieve anything. You do not need to go anywhere. You just need to stop. Stop running. Stop striving. Stop searching. And in the stopping, you will find what you have been looking for your entire life. Let us sit with Paul in that chapel for a moment. A man who spent 30 years searching for God only to discover that God had been waiting for him in silence all along. This is the paradox at the heart of every spiritual tradition: you cannot find what you have never lost. The peace you seek is already here. The love you crave is already present. The home you long for is where you have always been standing. But if this is true, why does it feel so far away? Why does peace seem like a distant dream rather than a present reality? The answer is simple: we are looking in the wrong direction. We are looking outward when the treasure is inward. We are looking forward when the treasure is now. We are searching for something to attain when the truth is that we have nothing to attain because we already are what we seek. The Buddha expressed this through the metaphor of a person standing in a pool of clear water, dying of thirst, not realizing they could simply bend down and drink. The water is there. It has always been there. But the person is looking at the horizon, searching for a river, completely missing the water at their feet. Jesus expressed this through the metaphor of a party to which the wrong people were invited. In one of his parables, a man throws a great banquet and invites all the important people. But they all make excuses. They are too busy with their farms, their businesses, their lives. So the man sends his servant into the streets to invite the poor, the crippled, the blind, the lame. The banquet is ready. It has always been ready. But the ones who think they are too important miss it entirely. We are the important people. We are too busy with our farms and our businesses, too busy with our achieving and our accumulating, too busy with our past and our future, to notice the banquet that is spread before us in this very moment. The banquet of this breath. The banquet of this sensation. The banquet of this presence. There is a story about a woman named Ruth who learned this in the final moments of her life. Ruth was 97 years old and dying. Her family gathered around her bed. They held her hands. They told her they loved her. Ruth was mostly unresponsive, lost in some inner world. But then her youngest granddaughter, a girl of 6, climbed onto the bed and laid her head on Ruth's chest. The little girl said, "Grandma, your heart is still beating. I can hear it." Ruth opened her eyes. She looked at the little girl. She placed a trembling hand on the girl's head. And then she smiled. It was not a smile of recognition or memory. It was a smile of pure presence. In that moment, Ruth was not dying. She was not living. She was just here, fully here, with a child's head on her chest and a heart that was still beating. That is the banquet. That is the treasure. That is the kingdom. Not in some future heaven. Not in some distant enlightenment. Right here. In the beating of a heart. In the warmth of a hand. In the presence of a child. In this breath, this moment, this now. The teachings of the Buddha and Jesus are not complex. They have been made complex by scholars and theologians, but in their essence, they are simple. The Buddha said, suffering exists. It has a cause. It can end. Here is the path. Jesus said, love God. Love your neighbor. Forgive everyone. Trust that you are already loved. That is all. Everything else is commentary. Everything else is elaboration. The path is simple, but it is not easy. It requires that we stop doing what we have always done. It requires that we stop believing the stories our minds tell us. It requires that we sit in silence when every cell screams for distraction. It requires that we love when it is easier to hate. It requires that we forgive when it is sweeter to hold a grudge. But here is the secret: the path does not require perfection. It requires practice. You do not need to become enlightened by tomorrow. You just need to take the next step. One breath. One moment. One choice at a time. If you lost your temper today, tomorrow you can try again. If you held on to a grudge today, tomorrow you can practice letting go. If you were lost in worry today, tomorrow you can come back to your breath. The path is not a destination. It is a direction. It is not about arriving. It is about walking. There is a story about a monk who was asked, "What did you do before you became enlightened?" The monk said, "I chopped wood and carried water." The questioner asked, "And what do you do now that you are enlightened?" The monk said, "I chop wood and carry water." The questioner was confused. "Then what is the difference?" The monk smiled. "Before, I suffered while chopping wood and carrying water. Now, I just chop wood and carry water." This is the entire journey in one story. It is not about changing what you do. It is about changing how you relate to what you do. It is not about escaping the world. It is about being fully present in the world. It is not about becoming someone else. It is about being fully who you already are. As we come to the end of our time together here at Monk's Temple, take a moment. Feel your breath. Feel your body. Feel the presence that has been with you through every word of this journey. That presence is not something I gave you. It is something you brought with you. It is something you have always had. It is something you will always have. The Buddha called it awareness. Jesus called it the kingdom. You can call it whatever you like. But do not let the name fool you. It is not a concept. It is not a belief. It is the most intimate thing in your experience. It is what is reading these words right now. It is what is aware of the breath. It is what notices the thoughts as they come and go. That awareness is home. That presence is peace. That consciousness is love. And it has never left you. It has only been waiting for you to notice. Go now, and carry your water. Go now, and chop your wood. But carry it with presence. Chop it with awareness. Live your ordinary life with the extraordinary knowledge that the kingdom is within you, that Buddha nature is your true nature, that peace is not something to attain but something to remember. Thank you for walking this path with us at Monk's Temple. May your journey continue. May your heart be at peace. May you remember, in every moment, who you really are. Thank you for the opportunity to create this for you.